Hi, Realtors, and welcome to the first session of this year's Capital Conference. I'm Sara Brown, your Realtor Party Director at SCR, and I'll be moderating today's panel. To kick things off, we've asked 3 South Carolina political insiders to join us to discuss the 2020 election cycle, RPAC's role during the election cycle, and also provide insight on this year's legislative session. Joining us today is Antjuan Seawright, Amanda Loveday, and Chris Sinclair. Antjuan is CEO of Blueprint Strategies, a public relations, advertising, and political consulting firm based in South Carolina. Amanda Loveday is the Chief Operations Officer of MP Strategy, a subsidiary of Nexon Pruitt that specializes in media, public policy, and public relations. Chris Sinclair is the founder and CEO of Sinclair Public Affairs, a North Carolina-based firm that specializes in public affairs, crisis management, media relations, and public issues campaigns. Thank you all for being here today. Antjuan, we'll start with you. You have advised and campaigned for governors, U.S. senators, U.S. House members, state House members, and other down-ballot races. You have a pretty extensive background in grassroots and strategizing. Can you please tell us a little about your background and your grassroots efforts?
Well, thank you, Sarah, and to this wonderful group that you have assembled all across the state. Let me say what my mother and father would be disappointed if I did not say, and those words are thank you for all that you do. This little experiment called America Works, because we all work, this little promise called South Carolina will be if we allow it to be and if we make it to be so. And part of the work you all do every single day, particularly when it comes to campaigns and elections, is so critical to make this little thing called South Carolina work. So I thank you. Sarah, there's not much to know about me other than I grew up in rural South Carolina, Swansea, the grandson of sharecroppers, a first-generation college student, only a second-generation high school graduate. So I know what it is to be counted out. But my mother and father and everyone throughout my life has always taught me that when people count you out, you teach them that they do not know how to count. And so I'm grateful to be here. I'm thankful for the opportunities that I have had throughout my career and throughout my lifetime. But most importantly, I'm thankful to help make South Carolina what I know she can be. And for the record, Sarah, I don't like being called a political insider because we'll see that somewhere as a bad thing, other
You're
than
right.
the fact that you and I know it's a good thing.
All right, maybe politicos then. Does that work?
That's very flirty. I'll take that.
Antjuan, you're also a CBS News political contributor, an opinion writer for The Hill and BuzzFeed News, and you host Insight with Antjuan Seawright, a weekly public affairs radio show. So it's safe to say that politics is your passion. Can you tell us a little bit about your role in the 2020 elections?
Well, I had several roles in the 2020 election. My role at CBS was to make sure that people were informed and people knew how high the stakes were, and people understood some of the things from an operative perspective that goes on every day in the business called politics, not just campaigns. So I played that role. As an opinion writer, I make certain that voices who sound like mine, from experiences and backgrounds like mine, make sure they're heard in a space where the noises are always so loud and people oftentimes cannot hear the lyrics. And so I pride myself on making sure that issues that matter, particularly to Black people, to rural people, and to communities that have been left out and left behind for a very long time, I make certain that those issues and those opinions stay on the forefront. And so that's my role in the media. In this election cycle, I had several roles. I advised the Democratic National Committee. I advised the Democratic Campaign Congressional Committee. I worked with a number of races down the ballot, including the South Carolina Senate Democratic Caucus, by way that I also advise here, and other races and issues all across the country. And so I say all that to say I've learned very early in my career and in my life, you're either going to be at the table or on the menu. My way of being at the table is making sure I help usher and guide issues and elected officials in getting to a place where they need to be.
Thank you, Antjuan. Amanda, you've worked for Congressman Jim Clyburn, served as executive director of the South Carolina Democratic Party, and worked in television news. Can you tell us a little more about your experiences and how you got where you are today?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me, and thank you to all the realtors today who are watching our session. Most of my career in politics has been working for Antjuan, but I will provide some insight other than that. I have run races from statewide down the ballot. I worked for the Joe Biden Super PAC this past cycle in 2020. I also, as you said, Sarah, served as the executive director of the Democratic Party for a number of years and then went on to be Congressman Clyburn's communications director. I've been at NP Strategy for 5 years and have really been able to hone in the skills that I learned as a former journalist and as a former political operative, we'll say, to merge all of those skill sets together to help clients, both small, large, nonprofit, large corporation, industries, to better understand how to communicate and how to work with different stakeholders, whether it be their employees, whether it be their board members or the community or elected officials, developing those messages and working to make sure that we're communicating in a way that's beneficial to the people who are listening and need to be listening, but is also tailored to what they need to hear and how they need to hear it. So it has been a whirlwind of a year, as it has been for everybody. Antjuan and I have had a fairly good political year, and as Democrats in South Carolina, we don't always get to say that, but we're looking forward to the future.
Thank you, Amanda. Chris, last but not least, you have been actively involved in politics in South Carolina and North Carolina for more than 20 years. You are recognized as a top influencer by multiple organizations. Can you tell us more about yourself and your firm, Sinclair Public Affairs?
Sure. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today and to be with this very energetic and distinguished panel. I happen to be, I think I'm the oldest one on this call, on this Zoom call. So I get to see this right here. I get this a little bit of gray hair, gives me a little bit of experience, I guess, and a few wrinkles to go along the way. But I really cut my teeth in advocacy in the real estate world, working for various organizations, advocating for the rights and interests of property owners, and then got involved and did some political campaigns for county commissioners, you know, those down ballot races that folks really don't pay that much attention to these days in terms of the media. It's not quite as glamorous and glitzy as the campaigns up the ballot, but they're very important. So I cut my teeth on a lot of that work primarily in the Carolinas, and then went to work on my own, did my own thing and consulting firm, and got into this world of independent expenditures before there were independent expenditures. There were these lawyers that would advise my clients that, hey, you can go talk about this candidate or that candidate and thank them for all their great work if they're in office, and say, call this person, you know, and thank them for a great job they're doing. And it was 2 weeks prior to the election, and perfectly legal, as long as you didn't say the magic words like vote for or vote against and those sorts of things. And then in 2010, Citizens United, the court case that opened up the floodgates for all these super PACs and quote unquote dark money, it was like, oh, now we can legally say vote for, we can use those words, express advocacy as they called it. So I got into that world with a lot of organizations, including the North Carolina and South Carolina Realtors, helping with your campaign efforts. And that work's been really fun. But along the way, I've done some of the stuff that Amanda and Antjuan have done. But on the other side of the aisle, I did a lot of work for Governor Pat McCrory here in North Carolina. And after that, have worked on a number of legislative races in North Carolina, and then a lot of IE, both in North and South Carolina. And then along the way, I've worked for corporations and businesses and developers and real estate interests as they advocate for their own ordinances or developments or whatnot in both North and South Carolina, and really across the country. And most recently had the fun opportunity of working for a national organization, the Credit Unions National Association, CUNA, and got to work in some really cool races on the independent expenditure side, including Steve Daines up in Montana and Susan Collins up in Maine and Rodney Davis in Illinois. But they were such fun campaigns to work on, because at the end of the day, people like Susan Collins, despite what you might have read about her nationally or locally heard about her, she's actually a really good senator and understands Maine better than a lot of folk think she does, and has their ear, and was able to withstand the barrage of money spent against her. And quite frankly, will be one of the most pivotal players in the Senate, in my opinion, coming up with that 50-50 split. So I think that having done all of that in the last several cycles and done this for years, the more things change, the more they stay the same in some respects. But I really have honed in on this independent side of campaigns. The candidate stuff's fun, and I've always tipped my hat to those folks. I will say this, that I have to say this. I actually spent some time down in Charleston right before the election, and I think I told you this, Sarah. I was down in Low Country, and I'm seeing all these Jamie Harrison signs. I'm like, Lindsey Graham's going to get beat. I was convinced, that Lindsey Graham is going to lose this election. The amount of money that was spent by the Democrats in that race, and I'm in the Charlotte media market. Oh my gosh, I could not turn the TV on or off on my digital device without seeing Jamie Harrison. And I'm like, there's no way. And where's Lindsey? He has no money. He's not. And then all of a sudden, voila, here we go. It seems like that was sort of the story of the day, that there was a split between the president and at the Senate level. So I think that while I think the most pivotal point in this election was Georgia last week, a couple weeks ago. That's been the most pivotal and consequential election of the cycle. But things are fluid, and this cycle was definitely a lot different than in the past, but still a lot of fun, and I wouldn't be doing anything else in the world.
Well, thank you, Chris. And thanks for bringing up independent expenditures. We'll dive into that some more with you and Amanda a little bit later on. Antjuan, let's go back to you. As a political consultant, you have many clients that have received support from RPAC, the Realtors Political Action Committee. Can you tell us what support from RPAC means to those and how it can make a difference in a race?
Well, it means life or death for the candidate. Look, you cannot govern if you do not win. Part of being able to govern is your ability to win. Your ability to win is predicated on a number of things: messenger, message, momentum, man and woman power, and the fifth thing is money. In a day and age where every candidate I know, in particular on my side of the aisle, has to block and tackle. They have to block out all the things that, whether they're true or not, that the Republican side of the aisle will throw after them, but also tackle the issues. And you cannot block and tackle if you do not have what I would probably call money, in this case, a good team on the field to help. And money helps do that. When your issues come up in the General Assembly, having good people who not only support your issues, but understand your issues is so critical important. The way you do that is, one, by having good people like you and Sarah, and Lindsay, and the team around to educate them, but also making sure back at home that their local constituencies not only educate them, but show them their support, and not just in an election cycle, but throughout the term by which they've been elected. And so money makes a difference. Don't let anyone fool you in politics that money does not matter. Now, there will be some who think that money is the end all be all. I remind people, Sarah, that money is a factor, but it's not the factor. The gentleman just laid out an example where Jamie did spend a lot of money. So did Lindsay. Jamie did not come across the finish line first. And so I think money is one tool to measure, but it's not the ultimate tool. But I definitely think it helps, from signs to staff to getting around to see people, TV, digital, emails, text. You name all the rudiments of a campaign that are critical and important. The Democrats, we have to do sometimes triple what Republicans do in a place like South Carolina. Money is so critical. And so I thank the realtors for their ongoing support. And I just hope and pray as we go forward, they dig a little deeper, sell more houses so they can give a little more money to good causes like my side of the aisle.
Thank you, Antjuan. And it's good for our members to hear, because I tell them that all the time, how important it is, our contributions are, but it's nice to hear it from the candidate's perspective. Amanda, your firm helped us with communication pieces for our independent expenditures this past election cycle. First, can you give a brief overview of what an independent expenditure is, and then what role do you think RPAC played in the 2020 South Carolina state level elections with independent expenditures?
Yeah, Chris gave a great kind of synopsis of independent expenditures in his opening, but I think the biggest piece to go on what Antjuan was saying was the importance of these type of efforts from industry in South Carolina. It's so important for voters across the state to understand, one, who they're voting for, two, that there are businesses and industry that want them in the state house making decisions that will impact your life. I said earlier, I worked for Jim Clyburn, and the number of times I got a phone call asking when their trash was going to get picked up just tells you that no one knows who does what in what level of government. And so it's helpful for voters to receive information from organizations like the Realtors to say, here is why we are endorsing and we are wanting you to vote for this candidate, because it gives a little bit of validity in an industry that everyone uses in some way, shape, or form. They have a friend who's a realtor, they have used a realtor, they have spoken to a realtor. This is an industry that has touched nearly every person in the state in one way, shape, or form. And being able to validate these candidates to make sure that people understand that you send this person, this candidate, to the state house, to county council, to city council, they are going to be representing the issues that matter to us as an organization. And that's so important when voters are being completely bombarded with information, true, false. They know when it's coming from industry that they're facts. They don't have to question the politics of it. They see it as a business to individual transaction. And it just gives that candidate an oomph that is really hard to get in any other situation. So the independent expenditure, generally, you have, to Chris's point, when the rules kind of, the floodgates opened and the rules went away in 2010, gave us a little bit more opportunity to spend and speak the way we wanted to for these candidates. To Antjuan's point, whether it's texts or phone calls or mail pieces or TV ads or digital ads, there's a way to communicate to the voters to make sure that they're educated when they go to the polls. I mentioned earlier that I served as the chief of staff to Unite the Country, which was one of the largest independent expenditures in 2020. We raised and spent $75 million across the country to help Joe Biden get elected. And by being able to serve as that positive voice, we didn't run one negative ad for Joe Biden. And when I've worked with the South Carolina Realtors, we don't provide one negative piece of information. It's all positive. It's all giving you the reason to go vote, not the reason not to vote for someone else. And I think that that's the other critical piece here that's so important to the work that the South Carolina Realtors do, is that we're giving them a reason to go to the polls, to go vote for whomever it may be. We're not giving them a reason not to vote or not to vote for someone. And I think that I thank you, Sara, for leading that path, because I think that's an incredibly important voice to be out there during the political cycles. And to your point, I think that it was successful. We worked on a number of primary races with you all, a number of runoff races with you all, and then general election races. And in all of those situations, there were some that were nail biters. There was a runoff race that we did together that we were even playing in the general. And it was a surprise runoff, I think, for a lot of people. And a lot of races we worked on in the primary runoff cycle were determined by 100 votes, hundreds of votes. It was, one vote per precinct in the district. And so being able to use the funds that you all have to communicate to those voters, provide those positive messages, really proved to make a difference.
Hey, Sara, can I just say one thing to you, because Amanda really touched an oven button of mine. Look, the investments that you all make should always be viewed as an investment, not an expense. because it does make a difference. I remind students when I get the opportunity to guest lecture that the closer your government is to you, the more important it is for you. And so you think about a state legislative race, or even some of the local races that you all may engage and be involved in. That's life or death for some of these communities. And so when you invest in the right candidate who you know is going to fight for the right causes, that's going to determine whether a community and the people within that community live or die. That's why we can't turn the light switch down on the net worth that you all bring to the table and the work you all do. And that's why you have to keep doing it. And in this environment, where there's so many balls to juggle, perhaps you're going to have to do even more in cycles to come, because your net worth is going to grow, the issues are going to grow, and the need to have good public policymakers in place is going to be even more critical and even more important.
Thank you, Antjuan, and thank you, Amanda. Y'all both made such good points. Amanda, especially that we only do positive ads. Just wanted to say that that's actually our policy, that we can only do positive ads. You'll never see us going negative against the opponent. All right, Chris.
In today's world, it's so refreshing. I just sorry to interrupt. It's just in today's politics, it's something that one is good to. It's like happy to do. I'm thrilled when I work with organizations that have that policy, and two, the voters like it. Like the negative onslaught of communication that comes in political cycles. It's just refreshing when they get a mail piece or they get given a digital ad or a phone call or a text that's go vote for this person, not don't vote for this person.
Right, and here's why. Yeah, right. Definitely. All right, Chris.
Yes.
You've worked with realtor associations all over the country. How important is it that local realtors association get involved in elections?
Well, I mean, I think that it's been said very well on this panel by Antjuan and Amanda that it's essential and really a part of doing business, I guess, if you will. If you're in real estate, you're in politics, I've heard so many people say, because so much of what happens is you're impacted. Home ownership, property rights are impacted universally up and down all levels of government, federal, state, and local. And so what I like about realtor organizations is they recognize their biggest strength, and that's numbers. What is it now? 4, 5, 6 million realtors across the country. Sarah, I don't know what your latest numbers there are in South Carolina, but
25,000 in South Carolina.
Yeah, and I think in North Carolina, right on the corner, I think Andrea was saying it's 52,000, which just kind of blows my mind. But I think the real estate organization recognized, thanks to really the leadership at NAR and at your state level, folk like your presidents and your regional vice presidents who recognize that, as Antjuan said, you're either at the table or on the menu. They recognized that, I think, a while back and in the early 2000s when you had the big blow up of, hey, are we going to dedicate monies from our dues dollars for advocacy up and down the ballot? And I think at the national level, there was a big push for X number of dollars per member. And I think that's happened at all levels for realtors, to where now not only do you have strength in numbers, you have the resources to back it up. And I would dare say that in most states that I've traveled to where realtors are active, that they're one of the biggest PACs, they're one of the biggest super PACs. They've got organization, they've got C4s and C6s and C3s and foundations and all the tools you need to advocate and communicate. So I think that I think it's extremely important, but B, I think the realtors have done a good job recognizing the importance of that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be where you are. You wouldn't be able to have the impact that you've had up and down the ballot over the last several cycles. And so I always say the model is with the realtors, and other organizations could learn a lot from that. And at a time where y'all were sort of first in on the Citizens United, now it's like, if you're not doing issue advocacy or you're not doing independent expenditure campaigns, you're missing out, and it's almost like you're not even at the table anymore. So having that tool is it's like your pack. You got to have it. But what I've seen happen as you all have evolved, as Super PAC movement, independent expenditure has evolved over the years, they've gotten much more thoughtful, strategic, and conscientious of, hey, we're not going to just use this independent expenditure effort as an extension of our PAC. In other words, we're not just going to give them, go throw 50 grand in this race because we like them. There's a little bit of that, but where do we go in strategically so that we get recognized, make a difference, and we're remembered? So that when you're done, they pick up the phone, call your members, and say, hey, thanks for doing all of that. And I know that happens with you all because you've said it has, and I think you guys have really honed in on your sort of strategic side. Hat tip to you for Sarah, for all your work, and then of course Nick for recognizing the importance and taking that to the next level. So your members can sit back and say, yeah, we were at the table, and to Amanda's point, we were in a positive way. I just wrote a blog post about this on a company blog saying don't judge a campaign by its cover, because you can be strategic and make a difference being positive, as Amanda said. I am a firm believer in that. And so many people in our world, Amanda, you know this, Antjuan, you know this, they get all jazzed up by going in and look at the tech campaign we just ran. We peeled back the bark and all that, and we made a difference. And I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah, but we also came in and did a lot of definition on the positive side. And, in a world where everything's negative, I think in this last cycle, I think positive. I tip my hat to the president-elect for being positive in his values. I do. I think that's important.
Thank you, Chris. Speaking of strategy, let's go back to kind of IEs and some stats on that. Amanda, we hear all the time that we only support Republicans, or we only support Democrats, we only support people in the low country or the upstate. Can you give me some stats to kind of tell our members that it's not necessarily true?
That is not true. So in the primary specifically, we had it split. We had 6 races. We had 3 Republicans. We had 3 Democrats. We had the upstate. We had the low country. We had the Midlands. So, it was kind of all over the place. And it was, candidates that mattered to the realtors, and that if they were to get reelected and put back in the state house would make a real difference. I also think it's really interesting strategically, Sarah, how you guys choose races in South Carolina too, because a lot of, as much as I hate it, it's a fact, a lot of races are determined in June. And you really focus on the ones in June that matter in June, and then focus on the ones in November that matter in November. And I think that that's a compliment to the strategy you guys have on races you guys pick. And focusing on, to your point, the demographics. We had white candidates, we had black candidates, we had female candidates, we had male candidates, and then obviously the geographic demographics were split as well. We also communicated heavily, and I know Chris may have some numbers as well, but hundreds of thousands of mail pieces were sent. People saw digital ads, texts were seen and responded to. And, Sarah, you and I would text back and forth a lot of times on days before election days and say, people they're getting driven crazy over these things. And you're like, you're right, but they work. And we, as I said earlier, won races by 100 votes, or went into a runoff by 100 votes. And, we do it in a way that the second someone says, take me off, we take them off. And so we're very day to day in that sense of being able to be respectful to the voter as we are communicating heavily. But, I did pull this number because I thought it was really interesting. Just in the June primary cycle, we called 150,000 people in South Carolina and spoke to them. Those are people who answered. And those are live calls, an actual person with a Southern accent.
Calls.
That's we all do calls.
Well.
And people know how to pronounce Gervais Street or
and UG
or Beauty or Beaufort. Yeah. And they can have conversations with these people. 150,000. I just thought that when I went back to the numbers, I just thought that was pretty remarkable. But yeah, you know, I've done a number of independent expenditures for different industries, and I do think that it's really great that you guys are so understanding of the political process, that you understand that there are some races determined in June, and if you can get them over in June, then you don't have to worry about them in November. And the ones that you don't need to worry about in June, you got to deal with in November. And so I think that that's such an interesting pull and push in especially South Carolina politics, but all over, of understanding that and then picking the right races to go and communicate in.
Thank you. Chris, you also helped us with communication pieces for IEs. In which of these races do you think we really made a difference in South Carolina?
Well, I mean, look, it's always interesting to sort of step back and say, where did we make a difference, and what or where did the realtors make a difference, and what is the reward for being involved? Well, the reward is you strategically, hopefully you pick the right horse, so to speak, in your analysis of who you're going to support. Whether it's, hey, we need to do this because they're good for us in the caucus, or they're in leadership, and let's just show them some love and be out there, and we can do more than just write them a PAC check. We can do all this other stuff. And that's always sort of its own reward is, hey, thank you for doing that for us, and especially if you haven't done it in a race before and someone's in leadership and all of a sudden their district is flooded with more communications in the form of direct mail, in the form of phone calls or digital ads, video ads, texting, so on and so forth. They are like, wow, I cannot believe you did. And I think you had some of that from some of the members that helped. They would pick up the phone, call you and Nick and say, I cannot believe you did this for me. I'm beside myself that you did this in a good way. I love you. Thank you. That is, in my mind, when you reach that point as an industry where you have a legislator who's not really in a competitive race, okay, maybe a little bit, but you do that, wow, does that make a difference for you on down the line in the form of relationship building? More so than just delivering that check, which is important too, by the way. And then there's let's get into this race, because we know that this thing's a nail biter. It's a tough primary. The one thing I'll say about South Carolina politics that's separate from other states, and not all states, but at least North Carolina, and if you put the Carolinas together, is that for the most part, y'all are done in the primary with your state house, state senate races. For the most part, you still have some competitive general, but it's still a fairly one-party state in South Carolina when you go down ballot to the General Assembly. That may change. I think we see it happening in Georgia. It may come and happen in South Carolina. Nonetheless, we're seeing that you're pretty much done then. So being thoughtful and strategic in the primary, which you all were, was very important. And there are some competitive ones, obviously, in those, a lot of competitive races in those, and they go to runoffs, as Amanda said. And when you can go into the runoff and play, boy, that's just icing on the cake. And then you can step back and say, well, we were really instrumental in helping that campaign get over the finish line. And then the general, I think you all were really smart, in particularly with the Senate, with Chip Campson down in the Low Country, who is this sort of, to me, a very unusual politician in that he loves the environment, loves to protect, wants to protect the coastline, but he's a good, hard property rights advocate as well, right? Like usually those are like, with Republicans, it's either, well, environment's just sort of a byproduct. Environment, that's for the tree huggers. We're not tree huggers. Mm-hmm. But what I'm seeing in Republican politics, particularly in coastal areas, particularly in mountainous areas, whatever, is that you'll see folks say, wait a minute, it's not just a Democratic issue, it's conservative too. So you had this candidate, Chip Campson, who's a well-known lawyer, grew up there, loves to surf with his kids, whatever, great story to tell, but in a competitive race. And then you all come in and voila, over the top. I believe I saw where Push Digital was involved in that. Wes Donahue running the campaign, maybe, because he used to do the Senate caucus stuff. And I want to say this about campaigns and independent expenditures in any state, in particular in South Carolina. When you get involved in these IEs, you have no control. period. The only thing you have control over is what you're communicating with. And hopefully you've been thoughtful, you've done a little polling, you've done some research, and your message is right. You've got the right folks, and you're delivering to the right people at the right time. All this, you're running a coordinated campaign. If the campaign itself isn't run well, gosh, then it just doesn't work. And I think that there's risk always for groups like the South Carolina Realtors jumping into these. But I think you all manage that risk pretty well, but you don't know. You don't know because you can't coordinate. You don't know because you can't talk to anybody. All you can do is read and talk to some people that might be close to the campaign that aren't officially involved with it and have heard things on the ground, but you can't coordinate. So in that respect, when you back a candidate and they're running a really good campaign, it makes your job a lot easier. And I think Campson was one of those. There were a lot of those we worked with you all, I felt like. And then there were ones where you're like, there ain't nothing else going on in this race. We're the only game in town and we own this space, right? Like the campaign maybe might send out a mail piece, right? Or put some signs up.
Really make the difference.
Yeah. So.
Thank you. Antjuan, we'll go back to you and kind of switch gears and talk about the legislative session that actually started last week. With COVID relief and the budget and many other things on the agenda, how and what other items do you think will have the possibility of being addressed this spring?
Not much. There's only so much oxygen in the political room for people to inhale. I think COVID and everything that comes along with COVID is going to suck up most of that. Not to mention, we have to still do a budget. It seems as if the Republicans' priorities are going to be passing some type of abortion legislation and so forth. I think if you add those three things up and you add the possibility of having a discussion of whether or not to sell Santee Cooper, I don't think there's much oxygen to flow in the room outside of those things. Maybe here and there a few small things, but not too many big things. So I would probably say quality of life issues are probably going to drive the day this session. But here would be my advice for everyone who's listening to the Zoom, you included, Sarah. Do not just make your efforts an election season effort, because that's how you get in trouble as an industry, and that's how you lose good people along the way who understand and will advocate for your issues. It has to be an ongoing effort. There's no such thing as a day off when you're in the business we're in, because for every day the realtors take off, that someone potentially could make a decision to run for a seat to replace an advocate or someone who's an advocate for your issues. And I know we had the conversation about money and everything comes with a cost, but in some way, shape, or form, do not find yourselves taking any days off, particularly in this 24-hour non-ongoing political environment. By the time we make a trip to the bathroom and come back, it will be the 2022 midterm elections before you know it. And that's how quick these things move. And so when things move, you all have to move too.
Antjuan, you teed up my next question for Amanda.
I didn't look at your cheat sheet, don't worry.
Okay. We just rolled out our Good Life initiative this week, actually, to all of our members and the public. Amanda, can you tell us a little bit more about this, since your firm is the one working with us on this, the Good Life initiative, how it ensures our messaging aligns with our members' top priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Good Life initiative is kind of a version 2 of the Quality of Life initiative that you guys had and have had in the past. And so there was a survey that went out around this time last year, and we took those results from all of the members and developed this initiative to find and hone and develop the top priorities of the members of the South Carolina Realtors, and then coordinate that with the legislative efforts and the IE efforts and then the member development efforts. And so all of the facets that are occurring at the Realtors, finding these specific issues and making sure that we are pushing through to find good opportunities for your members to succeed in these areas and with their clients. So we pushed it out this week. It includes a great video and a website and a lot of information that you can find to look at the messaging points that comes to these topics. So that's environment, it's education, it's safety, economic development, all of the pieces that really develop a community and cause people to come and make South Carolina home, or grow and make South Carolina a bigger home for them, and find ways to bring their families here as well. I know that we've seen an incredible push for new market opportunities for people in South Carolina. We saw an onslaught of people move here during COVID. And so all of these pieces matter. We worked with every region in the state. We actually sent out 8 letters to the editors to 8 different local newspapers talking about this initiative and the importance of all of the issues to the realtors' clients and to the people of South Carolina, and try to do it in a very regionally based way. So it's not a South Carolina initiative necessarily, it's a Charleston initiative, and it's a Beaufort initiative, and it's an Orangeburg initiative, and it's a Greenville initiative. Because it's not all one size fits all in South Carolina. What your members are experiencing, Sarah, in Greenville is not the same as what they're experiencing in Charleston. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to develop not just a holistic initiative, but then something that could be really granular to the members you have in all of the areas of the state. So we're really excited about it. There's a webinar coming up that members can join, and we'll be talking more about it there. You're on mute, Sarah. Sorry.
Story of 2020, now 2021. Chris, can you talk to us a little bit about special elections? You know, that's something else that goes on during a non-election year. And you've worked with us on special elections before, and recently have worked on one with us. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works and how quickly we can turn a campaign around for a special election?
Yeah, thanks. I love special elections because at the end of the day, there's such unique opportunities. And I think that, you know, the more that realtors can do to get involved in some of these special elections, whether it's at the local level or the state level, runoffs included, you know, it's an opportunity to own that space, and you want to be able to own that space. And I think one of the great examples nationally for the realtors was when Thad Cochran had a runoff there in Mississippi several years ago, and your national folks said, "Let's go," and y'all were in first in that runoff, and that was pivotal and consequential for the realtors. And that's the sort of thing that these politicians, these candidates, they don't forget. They just don't forget. And I still think that, you know, when the North Carolina realtors back in 2010, I think it was, I'll never forget the Harry Brown in the Senate said, "Without the realtors, we would not be in power." And that's the pinnacle, in my opinion. So you want to be there at that level with your efforts, whether it's through messaging and whether it's through ongoing communications or in these special elections or runoffs or whatever, because to me, that is the ultimate pinnacle. Now, ironically, the next several years, they turned around and yanked the mortgage interest deduction away partially from realtors. So they had to go in and do a little banging up against the head of the Republicans, the ones they had helped marshal into power. But in so many cases, going back to what Antjuan said, it doesn't stop at the ballot box. It goes on to the General Assembly and communicating and staying in front of those issues, lobbying that you all do so well, and being bipartisan in that effort is so important. So I think, you know, if I had to grade the South Carolina realtors on their efforts, I'd give them an A. I mean, really, not just an A for effort, you know, and everybody gets a trophy sort of thing. It's, you know, you guys, but it's up and down your organization. You know, go back to what the federal folks at NAR did and their realtor party and all the tools that you have at your disposal and the resources. I mean, that's the leadership that said, "Hey, let's go pick $50 or $35 or whatever from each member and put this fund into place." That was pivotal, and that allowed where you are today. So the foresight and leadership of people from South Carolina who were involved in that effort when they passed it is so important. So I tip my hat to your leadership up and down the system you have, federal, state, and local.
Absolutely. Amanda, I'm going to end with you. You helped us with a campaign for the South Carolina Community Alliance, which is separate from our RPAC. It's more of an issues-based fund. Can you tell our members how an issues-based campaign works and how quickly we can act to get a campaign done for pressing issues such as the affordable housing issue in Florence?
Yeah, so issue-based campaigns are obviously a little bit different than candidate-based because you're having to really truly educate the community about an issue and rather than an individual. And then you want them to act. So there's not an election day that they all go do that they're used to doing every 2 years. It's asking them to call their city council member or email their city council member, reach out to their legislator to tell them why this issue is important to them. So you have to give them the reasons why it is important to them. And obviously one size doesn't fit all. So you have to develop a number of messages. So these type of campaigns are fascinating and really interesting to put together because there are so many facets to it. But they are something that can be done quickly. Once you hear that a vote's coming up in the next couple of weeks, then you can put something together nearly overnight to make sure that the community is learning about the issue. And then the most important piece to that is that there is an action item, that we're asking people to go do something. So we're not just angering them. We're not just telling them that city council is going to raise their rent, let's say, and that's it. And we're done and just go home and be mad. We're telling them to be mad about it and then to go do something about it. And so specifically in that case in Florence, we were asking them to reach out to their city council member, and we were able to develop a piece of software that they clicked on a button and then automatically an email popped up on their computer that was sent to their city council member that was already populated. There was already information in the email. There was already a subject line. They could add more, but they could also just hit send and an automatic email would go to their city council member. We did this, and our goal, Sarah, was to email city council 200 times. I remember that was the goal we had. And we got over 600 for that campaign because people were so heated about that issue. And I think it had a lot to do with the message that we gave them. We provided a true understanding of why it would affect them as an individual living in the city. And how they could help, and they did it. I mean, they caused the vote to be delayed and get brought up again for more conversation, which was a huge success. And I will say that one thing you guys did that I really appreciated, Sarah, is once the community was successful, you then thanked them. So you spent even more money that wasn't necessarily, but I know there's no question in my mind the community appreciated you coming back to them and telling them what happened. 99.9% of those folks who lived in that city have no idea what's happening at city council. Mm-hmm. And for you to go back and spend a little bit extra money and say, you did it, you helped us achieve this goal and your rent is not going up now because of it, was such an incredible added bonus to these individuals in the city. That they knew that they took time out of their day, they sent an email to their city council member, and then they were thanked for it. It was just an added bonus. And it just goes to all of the things that Chris, Antjuan, and I have said about how well the realtors really do manage their campaigns and their efforts to communicate with the community.
Thanks. I think that's a good point. A thank you goes such a long way. So I applaud our board for recognizing that and agreeing to fund that when you didn't even have to fund it, to say thank you. So that wraps up our session. Thank you, Amanda, Antjuan, and Chris for joining us today. You all provided wonderful insight for our members, and we thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your time. Realtors, stay tuned because up next we have a session you don't want to miss. Joining us again this year is our legal counsel team here to play Is It Legal?